You're listening to an African Elements top news story for July 18, 2025. Please visit our website at africanelements.org for more daily news. Trump's aid cuts harm Kenyan refugees by Darius Spearman. The Trump administration's decisions to cut U.S. aid have deeply impacted refugee camps in Kenya. These policy changes specifically targeted vital funding, worsening conditions for thousands of refugees. Kakuma camp, one of the world's largest, has seen significant disruptions. Refugees, many of whom are black individuals fleeing conflict and persecution, rely heavily on this aid. With reduced support, essential services like food and sanitation have suffered. Sadly, this directly affects their daily lives and future prospects. Major cuts in U.S. aid under the Trump administration have stripped Kakuma refugee camp of crucial resources. Food rations are notably scarce, and sanitary supplies have dwindled significantly. Consequently, this has led to widespread food shortages, risking the health of thousands. Young girls, in particular, face challenges locating sanitary pads, forcing many to miss school during their periods. This situation underlines how aid cuts undermine fundamental human rights and educational access. Furthermore, these cuts have caused severe damage to the educational system within the camp. Dozens of teachers have been laid off because of insufficient funds, further disrupting learning. The loss of teaching staff impacts the quality of education and the future opportunities for refugee children. This reduction in support represents a profound setback for communities striving to rebuild their lives in challenging circumstances. Cash transfers, a lifeline for many refugee families, have been almost completely eliminated. These funds allowed families to meet their basic needs and maintain a degree of self-sufficiency. Their removal has intensified financial vulnerability for refugees, making it harder to access essentials like food, medicine, and shelter. The absence of these transfers directly affects access to education and basic necessities. This situation impacts not only individual refugees, but also the entire camp community. These cuts prevent refugees from participating meaningfully in the camp's economy and society. The lack of financial support traps many in a cycle of dependency and hardship. Since February 2025, aid organizations have acutely felt the impact of Trump's funding cuts. This is evident across Kenya's two major refugee camps, Kakuma and Dadaab. The reductions in essential support jeopardize the well-being of thousands of refugees. These organizations rely on consistent humanitarian assistance to provide basic services. Continuous reductions threaten their ability to operate, leaving many refugees without critical aid. The cuts jeopardize their ability to function effectively, leaving thousands vulnerable. This situation underscores the urgency of sustained humanitarian funding for these populations. Policy actions tied to the budget cuts included revoking funds from important accounts, such as the Migration and Refugee Assistance (MRA) account. This account specifically supported refugee admissions and resettlement efforts. Its defunding had immediate and severe consequences for refugees globally. The revocation led to significant delays and cancellations in refugee flights and resettlement plans. Vulnerable refugees faced disrupted travel and increased risks. Such actions stranded thousands, preventing them from reaching safety and restarting their lives. This also highlights how policy changes can profoundly impact individuals seeking refuge. Kakuma Refugee Camp is a sprawling settlement home to over 190,000 refugees from many different countries. As one of the largest refugee settlements worldwide, it provides a haven for those fleeing conflict and persecution. The vast majority of its residents are black individuals from nations like South Sudan, Somalia, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. These vulnerable populations, already displaced from their homes, rely on international aid for their survival. Food ration cuts have drastically reduced daily calories, directly impacting nutrition levels within the camp. This makes them even more susceptible to illness and long-term health issues. The situation demonstrates the acute vulnerability of displaced black communities globally when aid is reduced. The reduction in U.S. aid has particularly devastated the education sector in Kakuma camp. Tens of teaching staff have been laid off. Previously, several hundred teachers were employed, but now fewer than half remain on salary. This severe reduction has deeply hampered the educational capacity within the camp, affecting thousands of children. Moreover, the ripple effect of these layoffs extends beyond just classroom numbers. Critical educational programs are disrupted, and the quality of instruction declines. This limits the future prospects of refugee children, diminishing their chances to recover and prosper. Education serves as a key pathway to self-sufficiency and integration, and its curtailment traps a generation in cycles of poverty and instability. The U.S. aid cuts have created an escalating humanitarian crisis for residents of Kakuma and Dadaab. These camps, already burdened by limited resources, now face even greater strain due to reduced funding. Basic services like healthcare, shelter, and water sanitation are severely compromised. This situation heightens the risk of disease outbreaks and further deteriorates living conditions. For communities that have already lost so much, these cuts represent another layer of suffering and insecurity. They also underscore the critical role international aid plays in preventing catastrophe in vulnerable regions. The U.S. aid cuts to Kenyan refugee camps reflect a broader pattern of policies that disproportionately affect Black and Global South communities. Refugees in Kakuma and Dadaab, many of whom are fleeing violence in predominantly Black African nations, bear the brunt of these decisions. The reduction in aid highlights systemic issues that often leave marginalized Black populations vulnerable. This situation can be understood through a framework of historical exploitation and systemic racism. The U.S. has a moral obligation to support those in need, especially when its foreign policies or historical actions contribute to global instabilities. The diminished support for these camps, which host a significant Black refugee population, raises questions about global equity and humanitarian responsibility. It is important to remember that these are not just numbers, they represent human lives. Each cut, each canceled program, each displaced person has a story. Ignoring these stories allows for the continuation of policies that perpetuate hardship and suffering. Investing in these communities means investing in global stability. It also means uplifting Black lives, regardless of where they reside. Copyright African Elements.